Independence and Mammoth. And little logistics here, for those who haven't been here before, the restrooms are way at the end of the hall. They're ample, roomy. You could have, there's also one over here everybody's pointing, so you don't have to wander down. There's food if you're hungry, so please help yourself. Don't fade away and faint. My role is to explain why we're having this meeting. And it kind of all came about when last fall there was a campaign for new council members, and I was amongst those. And while I was out meeting people, I talked to people and asked them, how can the city make a more livable community? And of course things came up like housing, dealing with homeless, infrastructure, jobs, all the things that cities are all about. And among those things were internet. People would say, well, is there something we can do about the internet service here? And I'm thinking, never heard that one before. And lo and behold, as the campaign went on, I found myself using social media, which I'd never done before. And I found it to be a great advantage. So I put that in the back of my mind about the internet. And then when the dust had settled and we began our new term in the council, people came again to me about budget time, because we had put away money for urban renewal, about technology and economic development. And they came to me again, and people would say, so how can we expand the internet access to people in the city? How can we make it more affordable? More questions were coming up. I found this curious, so I brought it before my council members, and I said, we have these questions. What can we do about it? And with consensus, they said, well, let's research it a little bit and see what kind of discussion we can come up with and have a dialogue about what we have in the city and what opportunities might be available in the future. So I went in and explored things like next century cities and learned words like affordable broadband and upload, download. Remember, I'm a social net person. And so after agreeing to all this, we put out flyers and invitations to people who we thought might be interested in the community. And that's why we're here today. And hopefully we can have a discussion of ideas for opportunities and options and concerns that are around participating for information in an economy that we haven't even dealt with yet. So the goal is to make Lincoln City a place that's a place to work and live and ensure as citizens to have skills to participate in expanding global economy and economic development for us. So I turn this over to our city manager, Ron Chandler, who will conduct the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. So welcome to everybody. It's nice to have you here. As Councilor Casper has talked about, this has been really a rather fun process for the staff. She has been working with the staff with these ideas, and as she mentioned, the council some time ago, a few months ago, had looked and established some projects that they wanted to work on, and this was one of those. Well, one thing I have learned in my career is that you're always really effective when you go look to others to see what they have done and what has been successful in their communities. And so we looked at some of the cities around the state who have successfully created a municipal broadband system, and one of those is Independence. And so we have invited these four wonderful people here to join us and to be a part of this discussion. Now, the agenda for today is that we'll first begin with them, and they will tell us about their experience, what they learned, why they decided to get into a municipal broadband system, what they would do again, what they may not do again in going forward with that, some of the political ups and downs that may come with that. Following their discussion, we'll take a few minutes break while I set up the computer for a little PowerPoint, and then Tony Lasoya, the city's IT director, is going to talk to you about the services that are currently available in our community. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the surveys and then facilitate a much broader discussion that Councilor Casper was alluding to just a few minutes ago. So first of all, let me introduce our guests, and then we'll just turn the time over to them. The first is we have Marilyn Morton, who is the office administrator for MyNet. She's been a resident of Independence, Oregon for over 25 years and has served on the Independence City Council since 2001. After being rebuffed by incumbent providers in 2006, Independence and sister city Monmouth built their own high-speed fiber network. Marilyn watched the emergence of MyNet, Monmouth Independence Network, from her position on council. And in 2012, she joined the MyNet staff. She brought with her to MyNet a wide array of community and local political connections which have been beneficial. She also brought experience in running a business academy, being manager of a local chamber of commerce, and owning a small business for a number of years. At MyNet, she has brought that experience to bear as office administrator, a position which she says is often wholly comprised of other duties as assigned. By the way, on a job description, that is the most important part of it. Marilyn is looking forward to MyNet's expansion, a natural outgrowth of the company's excess capacity and the long unfulfilled need for high-speed services in rural areas of Oregon. She enjoys working at MyNet, continues her high level of community and area involvement, and values the opportunity to serve on the City Council. So we welcome Marilyn to join us. Don Patton is the general manager of MyNet, with more than 25 years of experience in the technology and telecommunications industry. Don joined MyNet as general manager in late 2013. He brought to MyNet a history of overseeing the implementation of a wide range of video, broadband, data, and telephone services. His focus on building fiber to the premise, FTTP networks, and expanding available applications that run on them continues quite successfully at MyNet. Don is adept at exploring and securing new collaborative alliances that benefit from the deftness of MyNet's high-speed fiber network. He has functioned at many levels of the fiber environment, including executive and marketing director positions, consulting roles, and oversight at the spectrum of business levels from regulatory approval, design, build, and implementation to sales, marketing, and customer service, financial, and daily operation. His experience developing a private exchange data network for a 5-state healthcare system facilitated the establishment of Oregon's first teledentistry site at the joint Monmouth and Independence School District's new Student Health Center. Don and MyNet are engaged in expanding the original footprint of MyNet, reaching out to unserved, underserved, and overlooked rural areas of Oregon. He was born, raised, and educated and developed much of his business acumen in South Dakota. He holds a bachelor's degree in business administration and has done graduate studies in marketing. Don and his wife Nancy are the parents of 2 sons located in South Dakota and Texas and a daughter living in Oregon. So we welcome Don today. We also welcome Greg Ellis, who is the retired city manager in Independence, who comes with a wealth of government experience. He has been the interim city manager and recorder, currently, thank you, of Jefferson, Oregon. He's been an economic development consultant in Dallas, regional solutions coordinator for the Oregon Governor's Office. He's been a city administrator in Canby and a city manager. And for those of you who don't know, there is a difference between a city administrator and city manager. It's really important to city managers, but nobody else knows the difference.
That's right. That's a fact.
He's been a city administrator in Canby, Oregon, and a city manager in Independence and Estacada, Oregon. He's been the senior project manager at Fisher Fabrication and the product division supervisor at ESCO Corporation. And so we welcome Greg today. Sean Irvine joins us, and he has worked for the City of Independence for 12 years, filling a variety of community and economic development roles. In that time, Sean has led successful business recruitment efforts and worked with regional partners to support new businesses and help existing ones grow. He is a board member of the Independence Downtown Association and has worked extensively as a liaison between that organization and the city. Together, they have accomplished a wide variety of infrastructure and beautification projects downtown, filling stores and helping revive Independence historic downtown. In addition to his role as the primary point of contact for businesses looking to grow or locate in Independence, Sean led the city's 2009 Vision 2020 Action Plan project and has coordinated several workforce development and entrepreneurial programs for the city. Sean is also the staff person for the city's Historic Preservation and Parks and Recreation Commissions. Prior to his time in Independence, he spent 4 years as the Municipal Service Development Specialist with the Peace Corps, implementing transparency and citizen involvement projects in Paraguay, South America. So welcome to Sean. It's nice to have you. With that, we will turn this over to you with just a reminder, please speak into the mics. We are recording this, and they are very directional mics. So I'll turn it over to you.
I'll
I want to start because you've been here, you've been at,
You
with,
do have the most history, so.
yeah.
I'm just old, that's all. So, because I did want to pick up on something that Ron said. He said being rebuffed by the incumbents, which at the time was Quest, and CenturyLink now. Mayor John McCardle had just been elected, I think, in 1998, and he knew that there was really a need for some increased services. You didn't have any services. You didn't have, like, I don't know what, email or what's that?
Didn't even have DSL.
You didn't have DSL, you didn't have voicemail, or you couldn't take messages. You had to have an external. So he, if you know John McCardle, he's not quiet. And he went and had discussions with Quest, and they said, okay, we're going to bring all that stuff to you. And this was 1998 or 99, remember. We'll have it to you in 2013. And he said, he screamed and yelled some more, and they said, okay, we'll do 2011. At that point, they went out, both cities did a study for what they wanted in terms of their own system. Could we do our own system? And the study came back and it said that, yes, you can, and what people want were triple play, which were data, video, and audio. So fast forward to 2005, we had our circle in, if you will, in the cities of Monmouth and Independence. In 2005, we started designing and putting in the fiber to the home, and in spring of 2006, the system lit. And from that point, it was very successful. But as you know, even from that point, early in technology, it's been 10, 11, 12 years since then. That is a lifetime, because everybody wanted triple play, but you know what's happened to phone? Phone landlines are going downhill. My children think I'm insane for having cable television. Why don't you get, I don't even know what they are, Netflix and, yeah, streaming. And so they think I'm crazy. So the only thing we've got going that's really good, I think, is data. And the phone and video are not so much anymore, or not as good. I mean, it's still a service that MyNet provides. It's not necessarily a money-making service. I'll let Don address that. But from that point, in 2005, when we first started this, we went to Business Oregon, actually, and they have a telecommunications arm. Borrowed a whole bunch of money from them and lit it, and kind of the rest is history. One of the things we did was we connected to, at the time it was called NOAANet, and we thought we were going to have to go 15 miles out to Ankeny Hill, but we got a little closer, 7, 8 miles, which was the middle mile from there into the cities. And then NOAANet became Lightspeed, LS Networks, and that's who does the backhaul for MyNet, I believe, now.
A portion of it.
A portion of it.
We've
yeah.
been able to put some redundancy on our network, so we have 2 carriers at
That's
this
what
junction.
I thought. But that's kind of just a short history of how it started, and I think it was relatively successful from the get-go in terms of people signing up. I don't know what the percentage is now, but it's in the 60, 80% range.
85.4.
I mean, you were around from the get-go, so, basically from this kind of meeting on, can you maybe just give a little, what was sort of the community side of, you guys didn't just come out and say, hey, by the way, we just decided to do this fiber system.
Right, yeah. There were a lot of meetings and City Hall type meetings. And a couple of examples I'll never forget. One young man came in, and he was totally against it because of the cost. And then we told him the speed, and he was a gamer. And so he became a big supporter. at that point. And then there was another gentleman that came in, and he was probably in his 80s. And he sat there through the whole thing and finally came forward, and I thought, oh, here it comes. And he said, I can't, this is so good. I'm so glad you guys are doing this. I was really impressed with that. So for the most part, there was a lot of support from the community. I don't remember the negatives, so.
Well, I can probably pick it up from there, having been, if you go by seniority, Greg was city manager when I got onto city council, and that was almost 15 years ago now, so I've watched the whole thing emerge. From a city council perspective, that we were making the decision to do this or not do this, in the moment, there was no way you could have stopped us from doing it because it was the right thing to do, and I got called regularly by Quest trying to tell me that I should upgrade to DSL, and I would sit on the phone with them and say, you check my address and see if I can do that, and it turns out that I was in a big pocket of not enough copper in your line, so gee, I'm sorry, you'll have to live with dial-up. And you all remember that sound from dial-up. And it got a little bit better, but when I started, I was with Teleport. That was my provider, and you had to pay for an email provider along with paying for your internet, and that's of course now changed. But the one thing that was probably a disadvantage to us in looking in retrospect was that we were so new into this that the people that did our studies to say how much penetration you'd need in order to be turning a real profit here, they were unexperienced in doing things like this, and they actually estimated very low. The truth was that we needed to get a far bigger percentage than what they had suggested to us in the research. But today, we are offering base speed of 50 meg, download 25 up. We have 75 and 100. We can do all three of them synchronous. And we have 85.4% penetration with two competitors in town. And we're not a utility that has a monopoly. We have to be out there as a competitive business.
You know, if I might inject one thing to what Greg was saying, is that actually the environment where the incumbents are not providing what the citizens of communities want was not unique to Monmouth or Independence. That's a pretty common story across the country in any city that does not fit within their business plan. You have to remember that CenturyLink or Charter out here, or even Wave to a certain degree, not quite as severe, their sole purpose in life is to generate income. That's why they exist. And personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But cities the size of Lincoln City, the combination size of Monmouth and Independence, just does not fit into their business plan. But that doesn't make it any better for those of us that are the have-nots. And quite frankly, the story hasn't changed to this day. If you're in a community the size of Lincoln City, I mean, really, you have to be in a community probably 100,000, now maybe not 100,000, but 50,000 population greater before one of the big players is going to find a way to make that fit into their business plan, to have enough penetration, to have enough income to make it worth their effort to come into it. But by the same token, they're right there to fight the other solutions because they want the little piece of the pie that they have. They don't want that to go by as well. You know, the question today that Judy brought up was, how do we get better internet here in Lincoln City? And that's kind of the purpose of this meeting, as I understand it. And that's no different than the question was a dozen years ago when Monmouth and Independence said, how do we get better cable TV? How do we get a cheaper telephone rate? Little knowing that data or internet connectivity was going to become the next big thing and stay there. Today, TV is on a downhill slide. The content carriers are absolutely raping you and I as consumers on the pricing of it. Our telephones, so we found different solutions to that. We call that streaming. I mean, in most people's households, except for some local news, some local weather, we're downloading just about everything that we watch. And that's regardless of age. I'm an old man. In my house, we stream just about everything that's rolling on our TVs, except for the local news and the local weather. And telephones. I mean, very few people have landline telephones. I've got in this industry in the telephone business with actually US West, which is a predecessor name to CenturyLink. We're all using these. And that trend isn't going to change either. Everything is data today. And quite frankly, I'll put out the bad news. The only way Lincoln City is ever going to get better internet is if you figure out a way to do it yourselves, because CenturyLink isn't interested in doing it, Charter isn't interested in doing it, Comcast isn't interested in doing it, all because it simply does not fit into their business plan. Not faulting them for it, that's why they're in business. And it's probably unlikely that a smaller but still substantial investor group like Wave is going to find a way to make a overbuild of the city, of fiber to every address, a part of their business plan. You're going to have to be involved yourselves to make it happen.
I guess that's my cue. So I'm the good time guy. I get to tell you about all the exciting things you can do with broadband and all that kind of thing. And I think it actually also ties in well with what Don was saying about essentially the profit motive of private companies versus government. Like Don said, that's it's free market economics. Private business, their job is to make money. Local government, our view of profit is very different than that. If we are able to recruit a business to town, that's a profit for a city. If we're able to have our kids actually being able to access their homework online, that's profit for a city, because you're building a better community. So I'll just I kind of grouped three different categories of what I really see as the benefits that we've been able to experience from having MyNet. There's really, what I think of as, most people probably recognize the sort of the home residential type of benefits. I mean, obviously, everybody gets to stream their Netflix really fast. They can download, upload pictures, have all the different kids all online at the same time and no problem. That's great. But you also have, like I said, opportunities for, your kids can do their homework online. That is something that a lot of places actually struggle with, and a lot of schools are moving more towards online systems. You can even, there's a lot of online universities and that kind of coursework that folks in more rural communities may or may not have access to, depending on their bandwidth. The other big one that I really think is important is the ability to work from home or telecommute. The rural communities, the resource extraction economy has really, it's not coming back. I mean, it's still around a little bit, but it's never going to be what it was. And tourism, in many places can fill a portion of that gap, but we need to find other ways. And there's only so many kinds of industry that are going to be actually physically able to locate in a rural community. So using broadband, we can actually access a huge array of other jobs, and other jobs that pay very well and may pay better than anything that's currently available in the community. There's a guy in Monmouth that is he's a senior IT guy for Cisco Systems. He runs like all of their internal IT systems. His team is scattered all over the world, and he works every day from his home office by video conference, and that's how he does his job. And when you think, I don't know what he gets paid, but I bet it's a lot. And having that kind of a guy in our community, that is a job that you'll never have a Cisco office in a community like Independence or Lincoln City, for that matter. But we still have access to those kinds of jobs because we have this broadband capacity. Another example of the the connectivity issues, there's another guy who's got a farm outside of town. Just kind of smallish farm, and he's kind of a gentleman farmer. He's got a day job with a software company, and he works remotely. He telecommutes, and he keeps a small office in town because the connectivity from his farm is not good enough for him to telecommute. So again, it's opening up more possibilities than we might already have. And I really, like I say, that's just for rural communities. If we're going to continue to grow and prosper, we have to be able to diversify our local economic base. And I think telecommuting is a really important aspect of that. So moving on, another category is I kind of call the services category. I mentioned a little bit about education already, but there's really a lot of other aspects to that. Within the schools, a really good example is a couple 3 years ago, the state started to require that all standardized testing be done online. Independence was one of the few communities, rural communities, that did not have trouble with that the first year because we actually had the bandwidth to make it happen. Most other rural communities, they're too small, their connectivity wasn't good enough, and so the systems kept crashing, and it was just this big problem. We were fine with it. Our school district has deployed Chromebooks in a majority of the classes to a majority of the students. That's another thing that, people, you understand the usefulness of it, but at the same time, you don't realize you've got, 100, 200, 500 Chromebooks all connected to the internet and streaming and uploading and downloading at the same time. That is a huge bandwidth hog. And so unless you've got a gigabit connection to your school, it's just not going to work very well, and your uses of those Chromebooks or those tablets is going to be more limited, which of course then limits the educational opportunities that you have from that particular resource.
Hey, Sean, could I inject one thing before you move past education? I want to just coattail on that example just for a second. One of the really fun advantages, quality advantages of being at least partnered, of a community of government being partnered, at a minimum partnered with an investor group to be in control of your own broadband network is when and by the way, Marilyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's within 5 years, what % of the education curriculum is going to be on online only? It's a staggering figure.
It is. It's in the 90s. Mm-hmm.
Is going to be online available only. So this is something that we as parents have to be prepared to provide to our students, is online access to curriculum. But the advantage that I wanted to share was you have a nimble factor that doesn't exist with the incumbent providers. When Central School District, which is a very large school district in the state of Oregon, it's one of the
largest rural ones around.
When they were getting prepared to do their testing, because of the connectivity that we, MyNet, provide to that school, we opened up our pipes temporarily wide open during that testing period. So they actually had access to 10 gigabytes of data while they were doing their testing. We didn't charge them for it because we pay for that whether it's being used or not. MyNet pays for that whether it's being used or not. We opened them up and gave them full access to everything that was available while they did their testing and cranked it back down at the end of that testing period for what the school district is paying MyNet for. But I suppose that probably could happen with CenturyLink. I suppose that probably could happen with Charter or Comcast. But I think if we were realistic, you'd have to move heaven and earth to get them to agree to do that.
Well, and you couldn't ask on a Friday and have it done on a Monday.
That's probably true, too. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no, that's a very good.
But that is an important factor of being involved in your own broadband system, is the nimble capability that you command, that you control.
Yeah, and that's a key aspect. I'm going to actually get more into that in a little bit here. The other thing about of having our own system like that, one of our concerns is the digital divide. We want everybody to have access. So we actually created a program where if you are free and reduced lunch at the school, you have an opportunity to get a baseline internet connection. I think it was 3 megs for $10 a month. Just to make sure, again, that the kids can download their homework or do whatever they need to do in order to, with that access. The other side of the service is of course, health. A lot of rural communities, we're in Independence, we're not horribly isolated, but we're still a little ways away from population centers. Other places are a lot farther, and again, broadband really has the opportunity to expand the offerings that a isolated community may have in terms of health, in terms of access to specialists, in terms of consulting with particular kinds of medical providers. Don mentioned in his bio, they mentioned the teledentistry program. So our school district created a school-based health clinic. They didn't want kids to have to miss, a half day of school, leaving campus and going, across town or to the next town over for a doctor's appointment. And so they created a school-based health clinic right next door. And as part of that, they created a teledentistry program. So the dentists and hygienists will literally go into each elementary school and offer checkups in the elementary school. I was in Ash Creek Elementary School. I was literally in the gymnasium or in the cafeteria while they're doing lunch. They have this little partition up over there on the stage, and behind the partition, they're doing teeth cleanings and checkups and all that. And they also do X-rays. And they take the X-rays, and the X-ray gets sent up to somebody in Portland who checks it out. And if there's a cavity, they say, hey, give this person an appointment, set them up to come to the school-based health clinic, and they got to get it filled. The clinic itself is pretty, that's a whole nother really, I think, awesome partnership, because I believe the service is all free for any student, and actually pretty reduced, free or reduced for the parents as well. So it's a whole, like I said, it's a whole nother non-broadband topic, but the teledentistry component I think is really fascinating and a good example of the kinds of things you can do, which really are just beginning to be explored as far as how you can use telepresence and how you can get better connected, remotely to access these kind of services. So the third bucket that I'd like to talk about is kind of recruitment, entrepreneurship, and notoriety, for lack of a better term. When we built out MyNet, the goal was to create economic opportunity. That's what it really was. The idea was, yes, we want our citizens to have good services, but this is really about creating economic opportunity, making sure we don't get left behind in the transition to the new economy. We have successfully gotten a few businesses into the community because of our fiber system. Shortly after it lit up, this guy, Paul Hurt, relocated his company from Salem over to Independence. I still don't know exactly what I couldn't describe exactly what he does. It's something about virtual networks and switches and whatnot, but he needed a particular kind of broadband and speeds and whatnot, and he could do it in Independence. The big one, we were able to recruit a call center. It's actually called a contact center now, because they do a lot of instant messaging and emailing and things like that in addition to the phone calls. These guys were an outsourcing tech support and customer service operation for a lot of different companies, and they preferred to be in rural communities, these sort of somewhat smaller communities, and they had to have fiber. And so, I kind of heard about these guys and approached them and said, hey, we've got this fiber, we've got this great little community, and ultimately they did end up coming to our community. It's, obviously there's a lot of other moving parts beyond just broadband, so I don't want you to think that just by having broadband, all of a sudden these companies are going to be, flooding your doors. But it's a good example of, if we had not created MyNet, that company absolutely would not be in Independence.
And how many jobs are they providing right now?
They're up to 200 jobs right now, and they've got a capacity for 300, and that's after a year and a half. So it's a real, that has been a very big boon. The other point I always make with that, when people kind of poo-pooed a little bit, saying, oh, it's all minimum wage, scut work. These guys, they believe that by retaining employees, they shockingly will provide better customer service. So, most call centers have 100% annual turnover. These guys have 20% annual turnover. Their starting wage is $11 an hour. They do profit sharing and health benefits. And the point I like to make is, if you've got 200 employees at a call center, probably 30 or 40 of those people are shift leaders, program leaders, IT guys, managers, those kind of folks. Essentially white collar jobs, higher wage jobs. And if you told me that I landed an employer with, even 20 white collar jobs, I'd be jumping up and down. You add in another 160, 180, starting wage, minimum wage jobs. That's great. And again, in a rural community, they offer shift work. So, if a mom wants to pick up a shift in the evening when dad's home, or if a college student, needs to pick up some shifts in between classes, or, it fills that gap that many times happens and can help float households a little better. I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to try
How about if I interrupt you for a minute? I wanted to tell the council side of a story that Sean was talking about, and you heard about the teledentistry facility that we have. For the last 12 years, every year, the City Council in Independence takes its show on the road, and we have a City Council meeting at the high school. It has become part of their class curriculum for graduating seniors that they come to this council meeting, and we do real business, and it is a valid council meeting. At the end of each meeting, we always ask the kids you started out with a question that says, what can we do to make Independence better for you? And after we get past the please build us a Taco Bell, then we get into the real questions. And a few years ago, we had a number of students come up and say, do you know how hard life is for kids sometimes? And a lot of us are suffering from depression, or we have anxiety issues, or we don't know how to, somebody has a baby already, they don't know how to care for the baby. What can you do to help us? And out of that particular council meeting came the impetus for forming this student health center, and that evolved into having teledentistry. So it is a continuing partnership between the cities and MyNet that makes this happen, and also between the citizens and the cities.
And beyond the Taco Bell, there's an airport in the city of Independence, and they asked us to shut the airport down so they have drag races. That didn't go over well. But pick up on something Sean said. Telemedicine was the buzzword back when we started this, and I had no clue what that meant. But I kept telling people, yeah, we can do telemedicine. But just this last week, I talked to a lady whose husband had an MRI, I believe it was at OHSU, and they got on and with an expert on MRIs somewhere in another part of the country to look at that MRI to study and see what it said. So it's become a reality, this telemedicine. So and I think I hear a lot is healthcare professionals are hard to get in rural communities. They want the metropolitan areas, I guess. They like the bigger cities. So I think this is one way to get, like you said, that out into the rural communities is better health care with broadband.
Well, in reality, it's no longer if Lincoln City needs a better internet access. It's when are you going to get it? Because that's the reality of the world we live in. Everything is data-driven. We may not necessarily like it, but that's the facts of life. And you're only going to get it if you put in a fiber network and have a broadband product to provide to your citizens. I want to say one thing, because I've been kind of the guy that brings all this sentences back down to earth from time to time. But I said, earlier I said it's only going to happen if you do it yourself. I don't want you to think that you can only get it done only by yourself. Today there are investment partners that are looking to do private-public partnerships to get broadband into the more rural communities. So there's options out there. I didn't want to leave you with the impression that you're screwed. See ya, gotta go. That's not the case.
Well, and I think just to kind of close my part of it, I'd say, being in a rural community, it has many apparent disadvantages just in terms of isolation, lack of critical mass, things like that. The advantage we have, especially right now, is people are trying to figure out how to help rural America. It has a lot of attention right now. And I think people have really recognized that broadband is the new electricity. If you don't have broadband, you're going to eventually just fade up and blow away like the towns that got missed with electricity did. There are, the feds have some programs that are complicated and and difficult to access, but at the very least, I think there is a sincere desire out there to help rural communities. And so if a rural community can step forward with a fairly united voice and say, hey, we've worked with our community, we've identified collectively in our community that we want to do this, and we've explored several options, and here's the thoughts here's the way we're looking to try to do this, there's folks out there that'll try to help you. We're still, this is still new enough that we're all kind of making it up as we go along. There's not one sort of silver bullet solution, but there are several variations of solutions that several communities have done. Each one a little different, each one unique to the community. But I think that's why this is really good and a good start for you guys, because if you can. And then, like I say, that united or at least fairly united voice is really, really helpful, because you really do need that to push through what will be a difficult and challenging effort. But if you really stick to it, it can happen.
There's been broadband dollars available for years, since the beginning of the Obama administration at a minimum. So that puts us 9-10 years out. And the intent for those rural broadband dollars is genuine, but no one's ever kind of really figured out how to access those dollars and get them into the rural communities, where they've been dispersed. By and large, like 75 to 80% of those dollars that have been dispersed have been given back to the federal government, because they never got put in. Broadband networks in rural communities never got built with those dollars. And I've been on kind of a mission since earlier this year. Back in the spring, I was out in D.C. trying to throw a big hammer on our senators and our congressmen. Even yesterday, Marilyn and I were with Senator Merkley's office over in Salem, not in D.C., but in Salem, saying, help us build a template that can be used in rural communities to access access the dollars that the senator properly already voted for to have in place to get in broadband into rural communities. We can't figure it out. Help us get a recipe put together that we can share with our fellow smaller communities to get broadband going.
And I think that federal money, some of that comes through rural utility services.
Very much, some of it, yeah.
And one of the things that just happened recently, we were talking about that before we started here, the standard or an underserved community was 10 download, 1 upload. You had to have that as at least a minimum standard. They have raised that to 25 download, 10 upload. And that tells me that they're looking at communities who don't have that, or at least 25-10, which would make it easier to get the money out to get up to that standard, you would hope.
You just got to remember, folks, that this is what's of interest to you and your community, and you wouldn't be having this forum if it wasn't. You're going to have to take the bull by the horns. The federal funds from RUS, the Rural Utility Service, from the Department of Agriculture, or the BTOP program that Obama put together, they're not going to come out here and say, here, take it from us and build a broadband network. They're still not doing that. Together, we've got to figure out how to go after this money and get it. And I, for one, believe that here in Oregon, based on the conversations that Marilyn and I have been able to have with our senators and congressmen, is that they're interested in finding that fix. They really are. I mean, they voted for this in good faith, and they're equally disappointed.
And some of the grant money that has been available, grant loans, whatever form it comes to you in, it has been, there was a mention of a lot of it not being used and given back to the federal government, and that's because there were several billions of dollars that were given to the large corporations with the intent of them serving rural America. And it didn't pencil out for them in a business plan that they wanted to pursue. So they sat on the funds for a very long time and finally returned them to the government. And there seems to be a misunderstanding in, or a lack of comprehension in the urban areas of how rural needs to be served. Because you can't do it neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, city by city. It's sometimes farm by farm. And that's a whole different process than servicing an urban area.
I think, we're just kind of starting to gab here, but I think, I like to always try to offer, concrete, here's things you can do, here's ways you can go. I've been to a lot of broadband conferences and talked to a few of them about what we've done, and it really seems like, if you are going to take a first step, first thing you got to do, get a good group of people together who are all kind of on the same page about wanting to make something happen. Then you got to figure out, you got to start kind of pulling your local market together. Who are your broadband users right now? Library, city government, county governments, colleges, community colleges, museum. A lot of times places, they start with the public institutions and say, well, hey, let's look at how all of them are getting their service, and maybe there's a way to use that to finance at least an initial build out, and then that sort of gets the primary sort of fiber system in place, and then you can sort of leapfrog off of that and say, okay, well, now that we've got the primary one in place, maybe we can figure out some kind of a partnership to actually get this out to the residences. So, yeah, I guess I don't know what else. It's probably about time for a question and answer or something else. But
I heard something about survey. Did you do some of this work already?
Okay, so I've got a mic to pass around. Any questions that you have of our guests, now is the time, but wait till I bring you to the mic because we are recording this and you will be on for posterity's sake. So.
Thank you for coming. This is wonderful, and thanks to Councilor Casper for pulling this together and the staff. She's been talking about this as long as I've known her, so I'm glad to see this day happen. I'm Deanna Hinton. I'm also a counselor on our Lincoln City Council. I have some real simple, simpleton questions, and I'll list them all to you first and fast. One is the initial cost, the timing, how long does it take once you have the money to get it here? And how do you do that, and the physical part of it, how does that happen? And do you provide ongoing mentoring?
I think that,
I was thinking yesterday, I'm sorry, did I?
No.
I anticipated that there would be the question about what's it going to cost to build fiber out to every home and at serviceable address in Lincoln City, and I'm not going to not give you a number, but I'm going to lead up to that number by telling you there's so many variables in building out a fiber optic network. It has to do with, who's the electric provider in town, what is the access to poles in town, what is the access to right-of-ways in town, how much of it will be aerial, how much of it would be underground, how much of it is, I'm sorry, I have to apologize, I don't know if I'd stick a shovel in the ground, how far can I go before I hit bedrock out here? Is it a couple feet, or is it, 6 feet? I don't know. How much variation in terrain, and certainly Lincoln City has a lot of variation in terrain. If I had to guess, and I promise I would. Lincoln City is how many water meters does the city bill? How many water bills does the city send out?
I think it's about 3,000.
About 3,000?
3 to 3,500, something like that.
Greg, you were over it. You don't know what is Dallas?
they're only their population of 16,000 in Dallas.
So,
Yeah, it's 4. Max.
I would guess the fiber network without a head end, without a central office, which is a possible way of doing it considerably more economically. I'm guessing somewhere between $10 and $15 million. with a
That's a good guess.
with a head end, where, meaning we're bringing in satellite signal into Lincoln City rather than bringing it from over the mountains from somewhere else, like Minot as an example, where you put in a telephone switch, because you still need to you have the revenue from the traditional telephone that you can get to make any kind of business plan work. And certainly, traditional telephone is going to continue for business for a lot of reasons. It's not going to lean toward cellular like it has for residential. If you're going to put in a telephone switch, and if you're going to actually be a data hub, a distribution point for data, a head end is probably going to tack another 5 million on that number that I gave you earlier.
5 million or a million?
5
5.
for a full-blown head end, voice, video, and data. This isn't cheap stuff.
Does Lightspeed have, are they on the coast? Do you know? They're not?
You want my next?
Pardon?
Is this on? Okay.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I would not, you didn't ask my opinion, but I'm going to share it with you. If I were Lincoln City, the last thing I'd think about is building a head end. I'd find somebody I can buy my services from that already spent the money to build a head end, somebody that already has a billing platform in place so that you can properly bill people, somebody that already has a customer service department that's willing to station the number of necessary bodies out here to take care of the truck roll aspect of doing this business, rather than try to replicate all of that here, because there's so much capacity. To build the minimal head end, you have the capacity for about 40,000 customers. Well, it's going to be a while before Lincoln City grows to 40,000 water bills, which is a good comparison for how many customers you have.
But that just takes care of the video end of it. That's what you're saying.
No, across the board. Voice, video, and data. I'd simply build a network, and we talked about this when you were over in Monmouth, and I'm not trying to oversell this idea, but I think this is the right idea for rural markets, is for a city like Lincoln City to either find an investment or a grant opportunity to build the network, and then share the revenue off of that network with somebody that has a video head end and can provide the services on it, on your network.
And for what it's worth, that is a model that several places, both urban and rural, have done. I mean, the city of Eugene recently did a fiber build-out more in their kind of downtown commercial core. They had a bunch of video game and software companies down there that wanted better data speed. So really, they essentially went around and got people to commit, hey, I would pay for a gig, I would pay for this and this and this, and then the city essentially paid to build out the fiber and run it to, kind of a central hub. But then they leased it out to anybody that wanted to provide services over that network. And so, 2, 3, 4, however many companies came in and said, well, we want to take a crack at serving these businesses. So they kind of created the competition that way. Others will build out and then lease to one provider so that they can provide the service, kind of like Don's talking about, or share cost, or there's, like I say, there's several different ways to go about it. They all kind of have their pros and cons and advocates and everything. So you got to kind of work through the possibilities.
And in the beginning of the MINET structure, there was a desire on the part of the cities to look to the incumbent providers and say, we'll build the system if you will come give us the access through your systems in order to have it to our front doors. And even that was not appealing to them, and so they said, no, thank you. Great you have a system, but we're not going to provide anything.
And how long? It took us almost a year and a half from the time we started designing the system to when it was lit. I think it was about a year and a half, a little under maybe.
And data came on first, and then telephone, and finally TV. So it wasn't all three at one time.
And then the how is just hire somebody to do it. You get a contractor to come in and design the system and get somebody to put it in. And as Don said, you've got different issues with underground. I don't know what the city code that say it has to be underground or on poles. I don't know what that is, but the people who design that and do the permitting would figure that out, so.
Who's the electrical provider here? Okay. Is it, okay. I was,
Pacific Power is quite amiable to pole leases.
sometimes if it's a smaller provider, that can be an advantage. For example, Monmouth has their own power company, so that makes life a whole lot easier.
Right, but Minnet, actually in Independence, we ride Pacific Power poles.
Yep.
And
Yeah, so it's
Minnet
not
has
like you're cut
a
out.
very good relationship with Pacific Power.
Okay, my last question was about mentoring. Do you provide ongoing mentoring if we should go down this road?
What do you mean by ongoing mentoring? From the outside, you mean?
When we get tied up in a knot, can we call you?
Oh. I'm retired.
That means he's got
That
lots of
means
time.
I'm free. Yeah, so,
This one's free, the next one's cost.
no, I'm always free.
Yeah, but the short answer is yes. We're always willing to pick up the phone and talk to people about things. That's why we're here.
You're not that far away, and it's kind of fun to come to the beach.
Hi, I'm George Polisner, and first I wanted to thank Judy for organizing this. And I wanted to, as you were speaking, I thought, I really admire your courage in putting this forward when you did, because a lot of the benefits now to communities are becoming very clear beyond just simple cost accounting with respect to establishing a foundation for innovation, help in education, what you speak of in terms of remote diagnostics and healthcare, which is incredibly important to our aging community here in Lincoln County, where we're often not well served by the medical facilities or health facilities that we have. And so there is huge benefit, both from an economics perspective as well as to innovation and bringing better paying jobs here into Lincoln County. But the work that you did was really prior to having a lot of, I think, evidence and support for what you did. And so I really find it remarkable and appreciate it when there is leadership among local city government to effectively take a leading role. And so I applaud what you did.
I was wondering, before we ask a whole lot more questions, if we could get a baseline of what is in town, because I know Deanna Hinton had asked about cost. Well, from what I understand, we do have fiber to certain places in town, so there might be less cost because of that. So I was wondering if we could get a baseline there.
First of all, like George, I'd really like to thank you guys for coming up, because to a lot of people, this sort of thing sounds utopian, and clearly it isn't. You guys did it, so congratulations, and you did it early. You got ahead of the curve. I was kind of curious about what kind of speeds you have. Sean, you touched on how you were able to bring in telecommuters, new business, and all that sort of thing. I moved to Lincoln City about 7 or 8 months ago, and I work as a freelance web developer. I have clients in San Francisco and New York, and finally one here in town, which is really exciting. But the upload speeds, the other day I needed a photographs sent to me from somebody who was in town, and those 128 files took 75 minutes. It would have been quicker for them to walk from one end of the town to the other and give them to me via a card. We don't meet the FCC definition of broadband that you said, 25 down and 10 up. So I was kind of curious, what are your upload speeds, and how important is that for attracting business? Because that matters less to a consumer with Netflix than it does to, like, a video production company or a freelance designer.
Well, technically, we have the ability to, on a fiber optic network, and it does require a fiber optic network, what I'm going to tell you. If you have symmetrical speeds, we can throttle them to the demand. It also has to do with oversubscription. And MyNet makes the deliberate decision to very minimally oversubscribe our data. So if I have 10 customers using 50 megs, I don't need 500 megs to deliver that to them because they're not all using 50 megs at the same time. The incumbents tend to oversubscribe at a rate somewhere plus of 20 to 1. MyNet has an oversubscription rate of, and this is a deliberate decision on our part, to oversubscribe at a rate of 9 to 1. So we don't have any network congestion, period. If you're purchasing 50 meg from us, 50 meg symmetrical, you get 50 meg up and you get 50 meg down, and that's what you get. Now, if you run it, that's between the provider and you. Now, if you go somewhere that's got a clog, we can't control that. But between you and the internet, we can guarantee that what you purchased we're delivering. Because we don't use excessive oversubscription, and we do have the ability to actually throttle it correctly.
What did you mean?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfectly. I did 2.66 right now.
And it probably gets a whole lot worse when you could probably don't need a clock to tell when the kids get home from school. See it bogged, you can feel it bogged down. And that's the oversubscription coming into place.
Was there a clarification request? Okay.
Thanks. And I want to thank you all for doing this as well. My name is Jackie. I'm from the Governor's Office. I'm your Regional Solutions Coordinator, which basically means we're here to help you solve problems and seize opportunities. And also Melissa Murphy is here from Business Oregon, who's also on the Regional Solutions team, who has many opportunities to help communities seize opportunities like you're trying to do here. My question is a little bit more I'm more interested in how the governance worked out in a small community like Monmouth and Independence in terms of who owns what and who regulates what and who then has the responsibility for maintaining what, you know, with your company that you're dealing with, you know, who has the fiber and so on. And Sean, I'm really glad you brought up the reference of the city of Eugene, or the Eugene area at least, because it's great for Lincoln City to know that you are not alone. This access to broadband and the quality of broadband and speed that communities need for school, medicine, and especially economic development reasons is just prominent all over the state. And even in urban areas like Eugene, probably everyone in the room, or even I, assumed that Eugene had the capacity that it needed, because it does have a huge company there that provides all kinds of services to residents. But what the business needs are, like this gentleman in the front row is indicating, is a little bit different. And if you want it, sometimes you can get it, but it's extremely expensive and isn't worth the cost of doing business then. So a couple of things. I'd be more interested in knowing about that. I would look at the Eugene model. It was a collaborative of not just the city, but the local utility, the Council of Governments, because they already had some infrastructure that could be taking place, but there were issues about who governs what and who's going to maintain what in the future. So I'm curious about that. And then also to just let you know that Regional Solutions would be happy to help coordinate collaborative conversations to see what kind of opportunities you were talking about do you start with government first, and how does that then transfer over to the private sector, and what else is going on in the coast. All of our coastal communities, we cover Lincoln County, but also Lane County as well, and all of our coastal communities are having the same conversations that you are.
Can I say a word about collaboration first? Sure. First of all, I congratulate Lincoln City, because you are a collaboration of how many communities originally? You've crossed the huge hurdle already. Monmouth and Independence collaborated on making MyNet. If you know anything about Monmouth and Independence, collaboration is not their strong suit. But
At least not with each other.
Pardon me?
At least not with each other.
Not with each other, yes. We're like sometimes fighting sisters. But the people who spoke were the citizens, not the cities. And so when MyNet was formed, it was on we used the ORS 190, and we're formed on an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement, which makes us quasi-governmental, which means we can speak to other governments and we can forego some of the things like RFPs and the other things that will bog your process down. But we split the ownership of Minet into the equivalent of what the populations were. So it's Independence owns 45%, Monmouth owns 55%, and that's the percentage that we've kept from that point forward. But Minet is something that every citizen in the two communities, they may complain about Minet, they just like the same way they complain about the traffic and the schools and anything else, because complaining is a spectator sport usually. But they all agree that Minet is a very positive addition to town, and there's no argument about who owns what, or you have 5% more than we do. It's very, very well accepted by the citizens.
And the governance is, the bylaws, you've got a citizen from each community, you got the city manager or representative, I believe it is, from each city, and you've got
A council
a council representative, yeah, from each city. So it's an even number.
Six-person board,
Yeah.
and so no city has any more voting power than the other. And there is no provision at this point for breaking a tie. You just have to learn to get along.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Jameson. I work as a remote employee for a Portland-based software company, and I rely on high-speed internet through Charter. Without that, I wouldn't be able to do this work. So my question is, I know the advantages of fiber, 1 gigabit speeds, but stringing fiber throughout the city is a time-consuming, expensive process. Did you consider other ways to deliver that high-speed internet to the community back in 2005 that is tower-based, like WiMAX? Is that even a possibility today? Does that simplify things? And do you know of any other municipal broadband systems across the country that are using delivery methods other than fiber?
Good question. Actually, there are some, well, I'm interim city manager right now in Jefferson, and we've got a couple of towers, and we've got a couple of Wi-Fi hotspots, very unreliable. Speed is, we had somebody come out and measure, and it was maybe the highest they found was 12, and they don't know what the system was. But we did consider that a little bit, but not very long because of those issues. We knew that line of sight was somewhat unreliable. We've got a water tower in the city of Independence that we actually had people want to put.
It's bristling with things right
Yeah,
now.
right now it is. But there was one person, John Conley, wanted to come in and buy bandwidth from us and service the community. But the problem was we'd heard a lot about those systems having problems, not reliable, and the speeds were relatively low. So we felt fiber to the home was the best solution.
That was in 2005, right?
That was in, well, the decision to do it was made before that. 2005 was when we pulled the trigger and started designing, yes.
I'm just wondering if today, if that's a possibility that could be considered at a lower delivery cost or a lower installation cost,
Yeah.
Single point of failure being that tower.
Yeah. And I don't know, I'd have to let somebody more technical, but I would say no. Just from a user's point of view, and as a city manager, interim city manager in Jefferson, the people that come in the door, when are you going to get fiber? I have this system, and it sucks. That's the technical term they use. So.
That is a technical term, by the way.
Yeah.
There is a truism, that a technical truism that you may not want to accept, but you need to accept. And that is, wireless has a lot of built-in issues, reliability, confidentiality, all of the things that Greg mentioned. It sucks. And I'm not saying that simply because I have some love affair with copper or coax or fiber. It sucks. The day could come where we could get all the bugs out of wireless. I think even with all the chatter that's there regarding wireless right now, it's probably in the next 25 years only going to be, as much as we hear otherwise, it's probably only going to be an alternative to the last mile connectivity. But the truism is this: last mile, the drop from the hard network into the farmhouse, the drop from the corner of the block of the street into the residence. But I really don't see that happening either. More in a rural, true rural, agricultural environment. The truism is this: wireless is only as robust as the underlying hard network allows it to be. And that's going to be true for everyone in this room's lifetime, and probably longer. That's the technical truth that has to be accepted. We all want, I want it to be wireless.
I think he just actually made my statement for me. But I was going to respond to that, too. I think you're right. I think that there's going to have to be some sort of combination of different options, and I think it goes back to what you said about what you really want in your communities and what you really need. And if you're looking at these needs of education and health and economic development, you're going to need that stability, that high speed, that reliability. However, I will say that there are communities from, say, Eugene going out to Florence who are looking at that on the pole. How can we get more towers? How can we, I mean, that's sort of short term. They're looking at that as well. So it's part of the evolving story with broadband, I think, and with access is, are we going to need to sort of look at this combination of options to be able to make it affordable and give everybody what they actually need. So,
Are there other questions?
Hi, Lori Arcetoris. I'm the Executive Director of the Lincoln City Chamber. And before I came today, I asked all of my chamber members, what problems are you having and frustrations? And I heard from more than one that they're frustrated they can't have the same provider in Lincoln City and Depot Bay. They have businesses in both or residences in both. So my question is, would this be something that we could do in collaboration with Depot Bay possibly? Does the 15-mile or so, distance between, does that make it prohibitive?
I guess I'll jump in first and then let Don provide the technical response. But I think bottom line, it depends on how much fiber is already existing. If there's already a fiber connection between Lincoln City and Depot Bay, that'll make life a lot easier. If you have to actually build out that fiber connection, it's going to be a lot more expensive. And then beyond that, it's essentially just level of difficulty. You've got everybody here in the room and on the same page. Can you get everybody over there in the room and on the same page with you guys? I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's just a different level of difficulty.
When y'all came out to Monmouth and Independence a couple months ago now, wasn't it? Tony, I think you and I were talking about, I said the ideal situation for you out on the West Coast is for Lincoln City, Depot Bay, and Newport join forces and get this thing done. And if you did that jointly, you would have the same provider. Lori, I can't see it, but you would have the same provider up and down the coast right here. That makes an awful lot of logical sense. Awful hard to do. Believe me, I know I have to deal with two separate city governments on a daily basis, and I'd rather shoot myself than do that. And you all know what I'm talking about. And I know what kind of headaches trifecta would create. But the economies of scale that would produce, and the things that would probably have the Fed's attention to drop some cash on it with the three cities doing it together is probably also very genuine, too, especially with the threatening thing called Cascadia.
All right, thank you.
So you said you had 84.5% penetration, but how many years did it take you guys to break even from that initial cost to where you're at today?
Can I'll be happy to talk about that. Minnet has a particular problem that it has a debt load that shouldn't have been there. And that is a direct result of, I got to be very careful how I say this. 4 years ago, Minnet was properly managed. 4 years ago, Minnet was able to move from having an operational loss on a monthly basis to today we spin off in the neighborhood of $1.4 to $1.6 million positive annually. Positive operationally. But we have this debt load that occurred, quite frankly, as a result of two things. One was too many years of mismanagement and too many years of government trying to run a for-profit business.
Yeah, I think if I would chime in on that.
I'm just being honest.
No, yeah, no, I'm just going to say, I mean, lesson learned, yeah, government folks aren't necessarily business people, so find business people to run your business. And sometimes the people that build out the network aren't the right ones to run it. You know, everybody's kind of got different specialties, so, yeah, I think I would just say that, you know, things maybe weren't as efficient in the early years as they could have been, but, you know, that's life. So and I think what it comes down to for me is we still have this fiber system. You know, it's here now, and because of that, we are still able to leverage it. You know, it's taken a lot longer than the original projections said, but like I say, you know, we've got this call center that came because of our fiber system. We've got these other folks in the community because of our fiber system. So I keep kind of going back to, you know, yeah, we made plenty of mistakes, but I think the net result is still positive.
I just have one more money question, and it's twofold. One, well, it's both data. Do you have any information on a possible increase in average income for your citizens and also increase in tax revenue for the city to help offset these costs?
That's an interesting question. So I will say, and it's funny because I was just having this sort of internal debate with myself the other day. We were, according to the federal government, 70% low to moderate income in most of the 2000s. Our last, and this is as it relates to community development block grants. You've got to have a certain percentage of your population low to moderate income in order to qualify for these. We currently do not qualify for community development block grants because our last survey came back and said we've only got 45% low to moderate income. I honestly don't quite believe that. Because with, you know, smaller communities, you know, you get a couple people, you know, included, you know, it's random sampling, but you sample a couple extra from one particular neighborhood, and that kind of throws the curve off. But, and so we're actually in the process of doing an income resurvey to do it again. But honestly, I was just sitting there the other day going, you know, I'm really curious to see what those results are, because we've got some new neighborhoods going in that are definitely a little nicer than we've ever had before. I mean, like I say, I know people in the community that they have to be high-wage people. So I'm a little curious. I'm positive that we are definitely, you know, seeing an improvement in terms of average incomes. And I'll be really curious to see what this resurvey comes back at.
Okay, we'd like to thank our guests today. We sure appreciate them coming and spending time with us. As a way of saying thank you, Greg has already received his, but we do have a gift that we want to give them. Stacy, can you come and give it to them? And again, thank you very much for being with us. You're welcome to stay. Come down in the audience. You can get out of the hot seat while we talk about the rest of it.
Thank you.
We are going to take about a 5-minute break so I can turn on the computer and get everything going. So come in and have some refreshments, and we'll be back with you in about 5 minutes.
Just like Christmas.
Very nice, thank you.
I know. That's awesome. My wife saw that last night. Wow.
You know, since moving out here, I bought $100. It was on. No, I bought it online. We can do the transaction fairly quickly. Oh, the pleasure is fun. Thank you for having us on. It's always fun to. Ah, okay.
Really appreciate what you're doing.
He's not a violent.
But he's good, he's the best camera thrower in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I'm sorry, I didn't see the connection.
If I said something like that, would you know?
When they had the Olympic trials, I don't know, whenever it was, they invited a bunch of the, the Olympic, and they had a, what's the name of the beer?
Oh, yeah, Ninkasi Brewery made a McArdle's Hammer Ale.
McArdle's Hammer Ale. Yeah, that's got to be a collector's item for him.
Is not, he is loud and he'll get in trouble, but he's not a boaster. He never brings that history.
I do all the time. He doesn't either. I just think it's so cool.
But I understand League of Oregon Cities has asked him to do something. Sure. He said he would be the liaison. I was talking to him yesterday about it. But could it be the connectivity from the Western American?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
What is it?
The World Track and Field Championships.
Coming to Oregon. We're starting to call it smartly so, Oregon 21. Because it's going to involve the whole state, even though I'm sure the majority, obviously, of the team, the city teams, everything that they place.
Think about it, it's actually.
That, utilizing other communities for training grounds and other ones.
We got to get Western on the list for.
You know what? Yes.
Wow.
We do. And you know what? It's not really our responsibility, but I've had the folks who practice to talk to the governor's office in our new boss, new boss, right?
Oh, yeah.
We got Jason Lewis Berry. If you don't know him yet, I want to make sure that you do get to know him.
I'd love to know.
Well, you mean like the Secretary of State? I said, well, no. Like the Hillary Clinton statement.
Right.
He was a diplomat. In several African countries and a few other countries that were, I forget what they were.
How long has he been on board?
Well, here's the cool thing that you would really like. He wears the hat of Director of Regional Solutions, similar to the flag and then a net.
Yeah, exactly.
But the smartest thing, and I don't know if you had this brainstorm, he also wears the hat as the policy advisor for jobs in the economy, like Vince Porter.
Good idea. Is Porter still there? Anyway, so, okay. Good. Okay.
So I thought that was it's just such a perfect, I mean,
Oh, our pleasure, really it is. We love talking
we
about
didn't have the fiber network to get over here.
Right.
And now, we're, obviously it's the same person, but we're both paths, he doesn't divide it down the middle, one is totally integrated.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah. No, I think so.
so anyway, he would be on the subcommittee, not necessarily the assembly to govern, but this is his but we're still trying to figure out, that's my area, it's like, everybody's kind of, we're not doing anything yet, and I'm not to say it's other people think they are kind of doing something, but really, they only see that much of it.
Right,
There's all
exactly.
these other pieces out there, but who's, I mean, really, to me, you're too young for this, of Y2K.
Oh, I remember Y2K.
Oh, you do?
I was
Yeah,
talking
well, I
about,
remember it as an outside observer.
I was talking about that during the eclipse. You know,
Exactly.
That's exactly, I was too.
Exactly. I said, I don't know when it's going to happen. Smoothly, and they'll be on it locally.
Right.
But there's all these other pieces
People know how to do it.
that, but at least if someone can at least coordinate and say, no, ODOT's role is in next month, at least let's sit down and go around the room and let everybody know where everybody is, so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. That's for the 2021, the Oregon 21. Yeah, great.
We started Fly by Night
legislature, yeah.
The what?
transit
money.
tax
Oh.
was increased specifically for this, but in language, it was like for the benefit of all.
Yeah.
And I think we can't wait till the last minute. Yeah. Like security needs are, what is it?
Right.
Oh, again, it's just my city management piece.
Right.
That says all.
Yeah.
It's kind of the force.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it will be great. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Okay, we'd like to invite everybody to come in and take a seat so we can get started on this next part. Hi, how are you? Good. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. The next part of our meeting is to discuss a little bit of what is available currently in our community. And to do that is our IT Director, Tony Losoya. Just by way of introduction, Tony was the first person I hired after starting here. And it's really nice when you nail it with a great employee. And Tony has done a marvelous job in three areas. One, in really making our IT department top-notch. Second, being able to talk the IT language with IT people. And third, being able to talk the IT language with people like me. And so we've asked him to come and talk a little bit about what is currently available, but I would give you one bit of caution for his protection. He doesn't work for Charter, and he doesn't work for Comcast, and he doesn't, or CenturyLinks, and he doesn't work for Wave. And so he can't answer questions on their behalf, whether they're questions that you love about them or hate about them. He can only just tell you what is. So, Tony?
Those are some kind words, Mr. Chandler. I probably owe him something now. So So I talked to, so there's three major providers in town, which makes us not a rural community. Rural communities do not have the providers that we have. They do not have the speeds that we have. And that puts us kind of in a pickle for grants. And that's just something, just information to have as we move forward. It's going to be harder for us to convince the government that we're underserved, even though it might feel that way some days with your experience with these providers. We have Charter, who provides residential and business coax. They do provide fiber. They will run fiber to your business and unlimited speeds, but you're going to pay for it. The residential coax is advertised as 60 down, 5 up. Business is 300 down, 20 up. And all of that is based on who's on the network at the time, as Mr. Patton described over subscription. There's going to be times where you're going to get that full 20 as a business owner. There's going to be times where you get 5. That's just how it works. Charter does provide fiber, as I said. The other provider is CenturyLink, which provides only DSL to residents. And they do provide fiber to business. It's very expensive. I just did the research because we were looking for another provider. Our contract was up with COSCOM, and the city was going through the process of talking to all these providers to get the best deal for the city. And CenturyLink was not it. And then there's Wave, which used to be COSCOM. And I haven't been around long enough to have experienced COSCOM when they were just COSCOM, but I think we've signed a contract with COSCOM. The city buys its symmetrical internet service from COSCOM, and they're now Wave. They're a very fair, good company. They have fiber up and down 101. And it's not to say the other companies aren't, but we just have a good business relationship with COSCOM. There's fiber up and down 101. There's dark fiber, meaning it's unused and can be lit up for anybody's purpose. And there's lit fiber. And all three of those providers be more than happy to pull fiber to your business. I don't think there's been a conversation about pulling that fiber to your home, but I think if you paid for it, they'd do anything. It all comes down to cost. So there are other providers. AT&T's in town. Verizon has fiber in town. There's the DirecTV. They use satellite. If you have satellite internet, you probably do not like it. And that is going back to speaking about WiMAX or wireless is just not a good experience. There's a lot of technical issues with it. That one day it could be great, or from hour to hour it could change performance-wise. But all that being said, there are quite a bit of providers in Lincoln City that can provide any kind of bandwidth that you need. It's not cheap. So that's the information I have. I probably can't answer any questions about the providers. If you're having a bad time with them, I suggest you call them. Would you? I can. It's basically published on their websites. Charter's about $60 a month for residential, about $200 a month for business. 60 down, 60 megabits per second down for residential, 5 up, 200 or 300 down, 20 up for business. Business, I think, is about $200 to $300 a month. Everything's negotiable. So I found that out going through this process, is that you could say, oh, that's too much, and then they'll send you an email an hour later saying, well, how about this? And so the salesmanship, so that tells me it's a commodity and that they're going to get as much as they can out of you. So take everything that you're told with a grain of salt. And if you are a business, please shop around, because to not do so is doing yourself a disservice, I believe. CenturyLink can give you gigabit up and down at $3,400 a month, which is not cheap. And Wave is on a case-by-case basis. And for an example, the city pays $725 a month for 100 megabits symmetrical. And we get the benefit of E-rate costing. So because we're a government entity, we get better pricing than a standard business. And that's just how it goes.
Brookings on up to Warrington or Astoria, or are there gaps there?
My understanding is that there is a fiber loop up and down 101, all the way down to Brookings and all the way up to Astoria. Both Charter and COASTCOM Wave have indicated that they have a fiber loop up and down the coast, and a fiber available to all those communities. Dave?
We may have a government rate that, like you just mentioned, that's a little different than businesses are afforded. But I think don't quote me on this, but I think it's accurate that the Oregon Coast Community College, the 3 centers we have, first off, we're all on fiber. And we're a few blocks off 101 in Lincoln City. And I think our COASTCOM bill is around $3,300 a month, if that gives people some yardstick.
Oh yeah, I got a quote for them for 200 meg symmetrical internet burstable to a gig, and that was $12.50 a month. So it's not cheap. Yes, and they told me that they couldn't give me gig because they'd be oversubscribed at that point, and so not for that price, and we couldn't afford anything more than that, and so we decided to stick with 100 megabit.
So I can speak a little bit to your first comment about the grants and the rural standing. As far as the state is concerned, my agency, Business Oregon, is concerned, and I think most agencies, you are a rural community. The trick here, and this is probably something that independents went through too, is showing that you either don't have access to a provider or that that provider can't provide the service at a reasonable rate. So this is something we've run into over and over and over again over the years, and why more of these conversations are happening now and the government is responding to these conversations with their programs is that we realize that yes, there are providers everywhere and there's fiber everywhere, but to access that fiber, to get that utility, it's a lot of times just out of cost range for people. So there are cities like Maupin and Sandy and Eugene and lots of cities around the state who are looking at that situation where, yep, we have a provider, we can't afford that provider. And they're not, without competition or without owning our own infrastructure or lowering some of the other costs, it won't be cost effective. So I just want to make that clear that there is a method to that madness, and that and agencies like myself, I know that we are starting to develop a program that look at rural fiber right now that would provide some funding for that. So
that would be great because they have you. I mean, they basically have you. You have no other choice between those 3 providers, and they know it, and they will price themselves accordingly. Just a little bit of competition, but I was talking to Don back in Independence. If you own your own fiber, you own your own monopoly at that point, and so you can call the shots.
And you guys think you're paying a lot. We pay $7,000 a month for 30 meg.
Oh.
And
I'm sorry.
CenturyLink was the only one that would do it for that amount.
Wow. Is there any other provider now?
No.
Wow. I'm sorry. I'll drag some fiber behind my truck out there. And
since the Minnet people are still here, can I ask what your rates are? We didn't ask that question.
Allison, I think that mic might be off too. You might want to see. Is it? Oh, then I'm just deaf.
For 50 megs, which is 50 down and 25 up, it's $50 a month for residents or business. For 75 megs, it's $65, and for 100 megs, it's $80. And for $15 a month more, you can have symmetrical.
So Don's going to take a line of fiber from here all the way back to Independence as he drives over the mountain.
I guess I have 2 points. The city of Sandy has municipal broadband, right? And I went to their website, and for residential pricing, for $59.95 a month, you get 300 megabyte download, and I don't see the upload speed, but still, 300 megabyte download. I mean, it's going to be sort of equivalent. So $60 a month, that's pretty good. It seems to me, just from a business perspective, if you've got 3 providers with fiber up and down the coast, and it's not fully utilized, if there's an empty airplane seat, right, they have an incentive to try and sell that seat. So is it a negotiation issue then? If you do, in fact, have 3, that's better than 1.
From my perspective, and this is speaking as a citizen, not as an employee of the city, from my perspective, it comes down to how many people are asking for the service. So what motivation is it for them to lower the price? If you have 5 people asking for the service, well, you're going to charge as much as you can. If you have 5,000 people asking for the service, there's an economy of scale there. It doesn't cost them any more to pull that fiber to your business than it does anybody else, but they have the benefit of being able to monopolize that fiber line.
What I'm saying is, if the municipality goes to those 3 providers and says, we have 8,700 residents who are interested in this, then if there is capacity on their fiber line, you'd think they'd be willing to negotiate.
I think starting there would be a good place, just to see what they have to say. That could be for another forum, to invite the providers and see what they have to say, but I don't know.
Just to tag on to that, and Don probably knows more about this than I do, but a lot of times, a provider, they will lease somebody else's fiber. So, so it would be interesting to kind of find out who owns what fiber out here, because somebody else can lease that fiber to access this area and serve those people potentially. And I know other communities that have done municipal solutions, one of the things they did was they got X number of residents to sign up before the build out ever happened. That was, they found a partner who said, if you get me commitments from, 200, 500, 1,000, whatever it is, people, I will then build out because I know I have a guaranteed customer base to make enough money.
And that's really common. I mean, there's providers in Portland that'll sell you the bandwidth that you want. You just have to get the transport over there. So you're now negotiating with the carriers on their fiber lines.
The existing providers, ourselves included, are now taking a more adult position on, I don't necessarily need to own something, and if you're willing to lease it to me. You have 3 providers and you have 3 different networks providing you. You could have 4 providers and you could have 40 providers and 3 different networks providing you. We are actually partnering with Wave in some of our growth opportunities that we're looking at, in that we're utilizing some of their network, they're utilizing some of our network. We don't have to have duplicate networks to do the same thing, and that trend is occurring. It's not likely to occur very quickly the older and the larger the incumbent is. They're pretty entrenched in their way of doing business. But the newer providers are understanding that I don't have to own it to make money on it.
It's the bits. That's where they make their money, the data.
I would follow up on that and say that most of what we're seeing from the government side is that that's what the cities are doing. They're building out their infrastructure, and somebody else is pulling the fiber, and somebody else is leasing that fiber. And I think that's some of the big understanding how this can work and how it's worked in other areas, that if you can just dig the ditches and put the conduit in and make it possible for the fiber to get pulled to wherever it needs to get pulled, that's a big piece of it. So, and that's a big chunk of some of that cost. So.
Thanks, Tony. So the next part, as I mentioned at the beginning, this meeting, this forum, we sent out about 50 or so invitations, and included with that was a survey. We received about 18 of those responses back. So it's not a very large sample, but it does give some interesting information. And I wanted to take a few minutes and go through what we learned from that, and then also then use the next little bit of time as just some brainstorming. Also, I will probably take a little bit of the role of probing. Every great idea deserves to be challenged and should be challenged if it's really a great idea. So I will probably be doing a little bit of probing and maybe asking a few tough questions, and we'll see where we go. So the first question that we asked, let's see. So the first question we asked is, are you using your BroadNet for personal, business, or both? We had 17 people who responded to that. 13 of them said they were using it for both. So the vast majority were using it for some business venture as well as their own personal use. We then, and as I go through these, feel free to just ask questions. On these first ones, I'm just going to go through them because they're just informational. The next question that we asked is, who is your provider? We had, again, 17 people who responded to this. 14 received their service from Charter, 2 from CenturyLink, and 1 was an other. And that other one, they received their service from 2 separate providers. Okay. Third question that we asked is, what is your current speed? And we were able to provide a link that would allow you to test what your speed is based on your usage. So the download speeds, we found them that they ranged from 18 megabytes per second to 115 megabytes per second, and the upload speeds were between 3 and 7.33, and we heard today even less than 3 on the upload speeds. And so one of the things that Tony didn't talk about, I'm assuming everybody understands. Does everybody understand the difference between download and upload? Okay. All right. Tony, come and talk some English and not technical talk. And the other question that we're going to have Tony answer is, what does symmetrical mean?
So download is receiving data from a provider. So you're watching a Netflix movie, you're downloading that data. You're buying something from iTunes and you're putting it on your device, you're downloading it. Uploading is sending data to a provider. So let's say you're a video producer and you're sending video files to your editor. That's uploading. And so sending files is upload, receiving files is download. Symmetrical means that the speeds are the same. So if you have symmetrical connection that's 100 megabit per second, you can send data at 100 megabits, you can receive data at 100 megabits.
One more question to add is just the English language and not the IT jargon. Tell me what that actually means for me as a day-to-day user. If I have 18 megabytes of download speed, what does that actually mean as a user?
You could probably stream 3 high-definition Netflix movies at the same time in your house. There's about 5 megabits per stream.
So if I have all 5 of my kids, they're visiting us, 3 of us could be using our cell phones to download Netflix and at a speed that we would constantly glimpse or any slowdown.
I think Netflix has a 1.5 megabit requirement for no buffering, so you just wouldn't get high def. You could put everybody on the network in your house and stream and not get high def. But if you want high def, yes, you'd have 3 people likely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. I researched it.
It's also worth noting that people get confused about megabits versus megabytes. Megabit is like 1/8 the speed of a megabyte.
Yes.
Okay. Not to be pedantic, not to pick on Ron, but it looks like it's 5 megabits per second for HD quality, 25 megabits for ultra HD quality, and now we're starting to see 3D stuff and things like that. And you talk about sending a video to your editor, and you're doing that at less than 1 megabyte per second at the top speed there. pack a lunch.
Right. Right. No, I understand. Yeah, you're right.
So in layman's terms, we've already heard that a 75-page document looks like I got a file full of architectural drawings or city plans that for somebody to do a police building, and I want to upload those. Tell me in layman's terms what that really means.
If you have 1 megabit upload and you have a 10 megabyte file, I think you're looking at 10 hours to upload that.
And the 1 megabit or 1 megabyte.
Megabit.
The file you just said is the equivalent of what? What would a common document of that size be?
I have no idea. It depends on the architect and the software they use. There's too many variables there. I could use like an MP3 file, which is, 3 megabits or 3 megabytes, or depending on the quality. It'd take 10 minutes.
I was just going to point out it's important to remember that these are standards as of today, and the trends are increasing in terms of file formats and streaming. And so when we talk about what's happening today, we really need to be thinking about infrastructure that will support the city 10, 15, 20 years out and anticipate the needs of the community, both on the business side and consumer side.
And as a citizen and not a city employee, I'm commenting here, Charter tells me they're upgrading their infrastructure. And as a citizen, I'll believe it when I see it.
So you just learned why we always stay with acronyms. Then I don't have to be correct on a bit versus byte. It's just an MBPS. Okay, so the next question that we asked, let me make sure I get the right one. What do you pay per month? And we received anywhere between $49 and $220. We did have one really big outlier. It was $6,900. I took that out of the group because it was really an outlier. It would skew things terribly. So, but they range between $49 and $220, and of course the amount was dependent upon what level of service that they had received. Okay, these numbers right here are really important when we get into the discussion phase, and I'll explain that in just a few minutes. Does your service meet your current needs? 17 people responded to that, 9 said yes, and 8 said no. And what we heard from those that said no was inadequate speed, both download and upload speeds, lack of reliability, frequent dropout, prices, speed, bandwidth, and so forth. And then the next question that we asked, I don't have it on the slide, is have you contacted your provider? And every answer that came said yes, and usually the answers that we got out of those that said yes is they're very polite, and they say thank you, but there's not much they can do. Okay? All right. Now, what benefits, and this is what benefits do you see, and this is where we're really going to take the discussion next. And this is where I hope to probe a little bit with questions. What benefits or improvements do you hope broadband will bring to Lincoln City? Now, of all of the comments that we received, they fell into one of these 4 categories, or into multiple ones, but they all fit into one of these 4. Lower cost, faster speed, more reliable service, and economic development. Okay? Is there any one of you guys out here that has something different that would not fit into one of those 4 answers? Yes, sir.
There could still obviously be a role for private sector to play, but if we control ultimately the fiber, we're not really subject to the whims of some of these corporate monopolies. We're able to make our own decisions, control it, and so forth. They can't just pull out tomorrow.
Okay, and controlling it gives us the advantage of what?
stability. If we're really interested in economic development, boom.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so, yes, sir.
There was another issue that just recently was added through, I think, the rollback of privacy in terms of internet service providers. And so a municipality or government-controlled service that respected the privacy of its businesses and citizens would potentially not be on that list, but is important now.
In other words, they don't sell your information.
That is correct.
And that would be an advantage of having control. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these. So I'm going to just pose some questions, and I'll write down your answers, and let's see where we go. So I heard a lot of lower speeds, lower costs. What is a low cost? If you picked a number that said, I think this should be the cost of residential service, what should it be? Because ultimately where this discussion will end up taking us is running numbers to see what it costs to build out a system, what it costs to operate a system, and therefore there has to be a cost associated with the fee. So if you had a target number, what should it be? Buck a meg. Okay. $1 a megabit, a megabyte, or okay.
Most people are paying about $60 a month. So, I mean, if you could keep it around $60 a month, but give you maybe faster speed, I think the $60 a month is what we're paying now anyway. Right. Better value.
Well, and along with that value, a lot of people that I talk to have good service in town, but say they live on East Devils Lake Road. They have terrible service. Or the outskirts of town. So bringing the same consistency to the entire town.
Okay, but they're not in town. Now, that actually brings up a really good point. What about outside the boundaries of the city? So, for example, we do provide sewer services to some areas outside the city. Other areas we have chosen not to, but we don't provide water. Should the city service outside of town? Okay, that's a great point, because it's kind of leading to my next question on this.
So yes, consider it an economic area.
Okay.
For record purposes.
Any other questions about price? Or answers about price?
I think tiered pricing is very important. One of the things I heard the MyNet folks say is that they offer a base level service. There's 3 megabits at $10 a month, something like that, so that people can upload, kids can upload their homework. And considering the demographic of Lincoln City and the household income, you better offer something like that.
So what should be the basic amount? Just to venture a guess.
The $10 a month for 3 megabit service, just so people can do the basics. But then tiered service on top of that, where, if you can afford and want more, you can get it.
Okay. Any other comments about lower costs?
I was just going to recommend, Ron, from a pricing structure, these are all, good approximations, and certainly a tiered structure is important, but just gaining insight into what the preponderance of people are paying, that will share it with you beyond the 17 people that responded to the survey can provide accurate input. And I would also agree that perhaps some of the higher tiered pricing could effectively help subsidize some of the basic services to bridge the digital divide in the community for our impoverished residents and citizens.
So that kind of leads me to the next question. So if we do put together a business plan, and we know the cost of construction, we know the operation cost, and we can't do it cheaper, what should we do?
The question is over the long run, can we do it in faster and better for the same amount and benefit the community more?
So are you saying, yes, you're willing to pay more if we can't do it cheaper, you're willing to pay more if the service is better?
Correct, and that we can realize a tangible benefit to the community by leveling the economic playing field for our impoverished residents.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Well, you can always subsidize.
Okay, don't go there yet. I'm getting to that question. We haven't quite hit that one yet. Okay?
I think in terms of in defining any kind of cost structure, it's important to understand exactly what the projected impact would be in terms of tax base and revenue by attracting employers that are paying higher paying jobs. And so this is not a direct one-for-one cost. This is about making an investment in the future of Lincoln City and the ability to develop the economy so that we're not completely dependent upon tourism.
Okay, so I'm going to go off of that a little bit. And again, please don't misunderstand any question or anything that I'm saying. I'm just trying to press the buttons a little bit. That's right. So, if you were to find that we can't do it cheaper, or even if we can do it cheaper, would you support tax-supported bonds to pay for it? Okay, let's go back over here. Dave?
Yes.
Okay, so let me probe that a little bit more. Would you support tax? So, one of the great things about cities, okay, in the services that we offer, is that we are even greater than a monopoly. Okay, when the city provides you water, not are we only the only water provider, but we tell you you have to hook up to it. We don't give you a choice. So we're not only a monopoly as the only provider, but we can make you hook up to it. That's why cities are really good at providing water. Okay? Same thing with sewer. That's not the case with cable television or with a fiber system, a municipal broadband system. So, would you support it with taxes if 100% of your residents signed up for it? Would you support it with taxes if only 10% of your residents sign up for it? This is just debt I'm talking about right now. Okay? Any thoughts? Councilor Hinton.
Okay. For me, I'd say I think we should explore this like you are a little more. But what comes to mind is, our sewers right now that we will have to do a bond for that. So I'm kind of like this, but I would otherwise say yes, of course.
I'm actually really not expecting an answer to these questions today because these are hard questions. And we have a small group here, but one of the things that Councilor Casper and I have talked about is the next step beyond this. And these are the kind of questions that the council is going to have to eventually answer as they get more information. So, Kirsten?
I'm speaking as a citizen, not as a department head. But I would say that for me, my willingness to support it with taxes would depend a lot on the idea of, are we going to be able to do tiered pricing to get internet to people who can't otherwise afford it, knowing the impact that could have on our students and the future of the kids here as citizens. So that for me would have a lot to do with it, I think.
Okay. Let me throw one other tax question out since it was brought up over on this side. Are you willing to extend it into areas of the county that do not pay taxes to the city? In other words, will the 8,000 residents support the 14,000 population that we could possibly extend it to.
First thing that comes to mind is that sounds more like a district. Is that something to think about?
Those people become potential customers and a revenue base over a long period of time, so they would end up, I believe, proportionally making up for the lack of initial investment.
Okay.
I was just going to add, Ron, that perhaps there would be a surcharge for out-of-city. That would help essentially make up some of the revenue. And in terms of tax support for the district, that could be dependent upon a predefined commitment level from citizens in terms of, yes, we want this service and we're committed to this service when it's built and ready.
Great. Again, my purpose today is just to get us thinking, okay, so that as Councilor Casper reports back to the City Council, we now begin with the base of how to go forward, what to begin to discuss. So we talked about tax-supported debt. What about tax-supported operations? Would you be willing to fund the operations of the municipal broadband system if the revenues can't cover the operating costs? That's cost less debt. Would you be willing to subsidize that through taxes? I see a head shaking yes over here. Any other thoughts? Okay. Okay, very good. Any other one like to weigh in on that? Or
There is an initial investment in developing this, so it may need to be tax supported until it is at a point where it is in the black. And we've put together a business plan to support that as quickly as possible.
okay, let me finish one other question on this. And this is one where it's really important, the discussion that we heard from the Minet folks about the government running versus non-government running. That's an important distinction. I've actually been involved in some government-run operations of municipal broadband systems, and the biggest mistake I saw with one of them, was 15 cities that were involved, was that they put their city managers on the board. Okay? City managers are awesome at being city managers. They're also really awesome at thinking they can do anything, and that's not always the case. Okay, so and so those communities are really struggling because I think from the same thing I had heard Don talk about was that their management plan at the beginning was not the best that it could have been, which was certainly the case of these 15 communities I was involved with. Okay, so now let me ask it. So let me move to the next question. So the next one we had was faster speed. Stacy, can you come up and put this one up so I got a new paper to work off of? Faster speeds. Okay, whether you talk in technical terms or in my terms, what does faster speed actually mean to you? And I'll start it. 8 people in my home all watching Netflix at the same time without the little circle going around. That, to me, is just perfect, okay? Faster speeds, what does that mean to you? Yes?
60 is screaming, frankly, but 300 or higher puts it into the...
For residential or for everybody? You mean for everybody? Okay. 300 Mbps plus. Okay?
Are we talking about right now?
I'm talking about what you'd like.
What I would like going forward is really hard to anticipate because bandwidth needs are scaling exponentially every year. So I would say that 300 down today sounds like more than I need, really. I'd be fine with 100 to 200. but I'd also be focused on upload speeds of a bare minimum of 50 megabits per second. But that's talking today, and I expect my needs will change in a year or two.
Upload in today's standards. Okay, very good.
I'd say when you ask what speed means to us, to me, it's not a figure, it's not a number right there, although I like the range. What it is to me is it's much more the 9x oversubscription level cap that something that says whatever I'm signing up for, I get it or within reasonable bounds. What drives me crazy is paying for X and getting a fraction of X.
That's an interesting, Tony had mentioned our discussions recently about the services provided to our buildings and our negotiations with that. And it was that oversubscription which was the biggest discussion we had at the end. Because actually we were talking about in the idea of bringing it here as a discussion point of getting a gigabyte and saying, look, we got a gigabyte. What we heard mostly is that we can guarantee you this amount with bursts up to gigabyte if you need it. Okay, no one was coming in and saying, we'll guarantee you this, okay, that amount. Okay, so that was a very interesting discussion in our negotiations that we had. Quite frankly, I pushed and pushed, and Tony got more frustrated because he was the go-between guy between the companies and me. And in the end, we just did not find anybody that would say, if you want a full gigabyte, we're going to dedicate it to you. Go ahead, Tony. That's true. Thank you. Yes.
That was just a huge issue that David brought up. Is it's essentially a quality of service. It's to me speed with respect to getting what you pay for. It's a consistent quality of service, and so having an expectation that I can conduct a video teleconference with my board, who are scattered all over the world, and have good quality audio and video, and so it's essentially a consistency more than effectively a speed.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment on the speed piece. Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but that call center, 200-seat call center in Independence, they're running on a 100 meg connection. And it's they wanted their own dedicated fiber loop to make absolutely sure that it was only them on it, but still it's a 100 meg connection. So when you think about capacity and what that use is, that gives you some perspective.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Tony?
I just want to follow up on that a gigabit is a lot of bandwidth. It sounds great, but it is a lot of bandwidth, and yeah.
We just wanted to announce it here to just show you how cool we are.
Well, no. I'm just saying to ask for to say that I need a gigabit of Ethernet for my home is right today is ridiculous, because that's a lot of bandwidth.
Before we turn it over to you, but that was part of the interesting conversation that Tony had, and I said, come on, we really want to go and announce this and say, look how cool this is. And Tony's right, we just kept coming back to dollars on it. And by the end, I was going, okay. Don?
Just remember that if you build a fiber optic network, you have literally no limitations to how much bandwidth you can push through that. You do have limitations on copper plant like CenturyLink is providing, and you have limitations on a coaxial plant like Charter is providing. But if you put in a fiber optic network, and 2 years from now everybody needs a gig minimum, which ain't going to happen, but the network, you don't have to forklift the network to increase speeds on it. You have to buy more to pump it through, but you're selling more.
Back over here.
Hi, my name's Lewis Smith, and like several people in here, I'm also I'm a developer. I do have a lot of just contract work I do. But I wanted to make a point that we all don't all fit in the same box either, so we definitely do have different needs. I work in a command line interface most of the time in a Unix shell, so speed isn't, I do, sometimes work with media files too, but for the most part, the bigger deal for me is the dependability. If I get locked out or timed out, I'm dead, because sometimes I'm logged directly into into the server. So I would love to have faster speeds and whatnot, but I didn't want to lose sight of the dependability issue. We all have different needs, and that would be something worth checking into is, what are, the needs across the board.
Thank you, because you just moved us right into the next part, and that's reliable service. So I appreciate that. Don, I just need to make sure, when you talk about fiber, you're talking about fiber from your head end to what's the end point of the fiber?
I'm talking about taking the fiber to the end user.
Okay. Now, that's important to mention because often you'll see a fiber backbone, and then it'll have coaxial from the pole or from the box to the house. And so what Minette did was that they ran the fiber all the way to the end user point, to the entrance into the house. Okay. Don, how does that affect the reliability of the service?
I actually chuckle when I read on some of the blogs and our own Facebook page. Every once in a while, people will say, "Oh God, they're always down." Well, yeah, we do go down every once in a while, but we are 5.9's reliability, and we're so seldom down that when we are down, it's a big, big deal, and they think we're always down. But that's one of the niceties of fiber is its reliability.
Okay, so we got a lot of comments about reliability, but not a lot of detail as to what reliability actually means. So that's why I want to probe a little bit here. Laura?
When I was IT manager for callruby.com, which is a virtual receptionist company in Portland, and we had to be up 24 hours a day. And so we had redundant T1 lines in order to guarantee that. So if we are looking at this project for economic development, if we're looking at people telecommuting, attracting call centers, things of that nature, we do need to really focus on being up as much as possible with that reliability for economic standpoint. So we need to look at our storm systems as well and bring up weather as far as if we're going to really push to sell this to a company to bring in jobs of that nature. And so that's a concern of mine is I could only travel 75 miles from Portland unless I had somebody on my back because we provided services globally. So if we're going to offer a way for our citizens to compete in the global market, we need to give them as much uptime as possible if this is for economic development.
Okay, so what I got out of that was 24 hours, 365 days, up, doesn't go down. Okay? We use that also in the way of sewer. You can flush your toilet 24, 365. Okay? So other thoughts, comments about what reliability actually means? Yes, sir.
So 24, 365 is just as awesome as it is impossible. In the real world, what he was talking about, the 5.9s, 99.999% uptime is that's the holy grail. And if you can get to that, you're outperforming a lot of big companies everybody's heard of. I think essentially it just needs to be hey, outages happen, but they need to be so minimal that they don't cause anybody to lose a bunch of money.
I like that answer. Don't lose money.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and each 9 has an associated cost, but there is also a definite economic cost. I hear from people that work at the outlet mall that often they have a loss of service and end up having to run credit transactions via phone lines. If that happens during the holiday season, that's loss of revenue. For a lot of smaller businesses that can't afford to lose revenue. And so I would absolutely support. I was a guy in the survey, the one other, because the service to my home business in Coronado Shores, I have 2 ISPs. Invariably, one goes down, and then I have to switch everything over to the other. So I'm paying maybe $220 a month for service that really is worth about $60 a month, and that money could be circulating in the local community economy, and I'm certain I'm not the only one.
So let me ask you another interesting question with all of this. Why do you think that the local government can do better than the businesses that are providing it now? We have 3 businesses that are providing it. What is it that makes you think we can do better?
I would say at this point in time that the market doesn't solve all of our problems. And as a small rural area, economic area, it historically has not been well served by private ISPs. And so at this point in time, there are great examples of municipalities and I think public-private partnerships that are doing a much better job, because essentially the profit motive, while great for competition and a lot of other innovation, doesn't work in all cases. And this is a case, as with many other rural areas, where the market is failing to serve the people of the community.
Okay, I'm going to take, Dave, and then I'm going to take another kind of hard approach on this.
Well, I think that what George said is true, and I would say if you're asking why government and not a private company, I think that a key element is we've already touched on the lack of critical mass. We've already touched on the fact that this is sort of a not the most appealing market to be diving into. I mean, if it were, we'd have Xfinity and all the big players playing, but we don't have anything like 50,000 folks or potential customers, barring an arrangement with Newport, which I think was an interesting thing to throw out there. But at the end of the day, when I'm frustrated with lack of service that is exacerbated by the conditions and the lack of people on my street and the lack of financial incentive for the provider to ramp up the services to my neck of the woods, I have no recourse but to call some number in Atlanta. If you're running it, we can vote the bums out. I mean, we have direct.
I like
no
that
offense,
you said that and said you didn't say fire the city manager.
But I'm just saying that I like the local control, and I think that you'll appreciate what's happening because, well, among other things, you'll be enjoying the same level of service.
Okay, very good. All right, any other thoughts on reliability? Lewis.
My girlfriend has a small business across the street, and sometimes when she gets there in the morning, it's dark, and so I put in a 16-camera surveillance system over there that I can monitor 24/7 if I happen to be up at that time of the night, and which I am a lot. And I will log in sometimes, and I call the police when I see people with weapons in the parking lot. It gets really frustrating for me when I'm trying to follow somebody or get a plate, and my latency or lag time is so slow that by the time I get that camera spun, they're out of the lot. And that's one of those areas that is kind of more of a security, safety issue, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in town that, kind of relies on that just to kind of keep an eye on things. So, again, I just wanted to point that out, and, that there are other things going on that, not just a monetary component, but safety that could be benefited by faster service and more reliable.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about economic development in just the last few minutes. We promised we'd get you out of here by 4. So let's talk a little bit about economic development. We've heard a lot about that today from Minet and from Independence and some of the success that they have enjoyed. We did get some comments of what it means. Generally, those comments were very general, okay? Not a lot of specifics. So what I want to do is to ask you this question. If we were to build this, what is your expectation as far as economic development? What would you think, what should we have as our goal? What is it that you would say after 5 years, they did a great job because the municipal broadband system did fill in the blank? Okay? Yes.
Well, first, it's not just municipal broadband, but speaking as someone who moved here from Portland to live full-time, it is the uniqueness of this place to live and everything that it offers that has to come together to attract business, attract telecommuters, attract people from outside the community. So it's the hospital, it's the school, it's the geography, it's the ocean, it's the high-speed internet. And we are competitive with other municipalities. We're competitive with Independence. We're competitive with Newport. We're competitive with Portland. So, that is one piece of the puzzle, municipal broadband, one piece of the puzzle that helps us outcompete other places for jobs and all of that. That's part of it.
Let me explore this one a little bit more because this is really important. We talked about build-out, okay? Independence has done a full build-out system where they're servicing everybody. And we talk about economic development, but we're talking about two types of economic development that have a big impact on the type of broadband system that you put in, okay? If you mean that it should be a great place to telecommute, okay, then you are talking full build-out to every home so that people can run their business from their home. If you're talking about attracting businesses in, I can't bring a business and put it next to your home. It has to go into a commercial area. So would you be satisfied with a broadband system that only went to the commercial areas to attract and bring businesses in, or is that not sufficient enough? Dave?
Short answer to that latter question, no. I think that I think you're looking at another tool for economic gardening. I think you're looking at we hear from businesses like what you've already heard from today. One of our clients that I just met with is a graphic designer who's having the exact same upload issues, and I see William in the audience. I see other telecommuters, and I think that you ask about metrics. It's very difficult to say, well, gosh, the 10-year economic update in Lincoln County said that the median family income in Lincoln City is a horribly depressing $29,500 or something, just awful. And yet, so do we want to move the needle to some degree? There are so many other factors at play that I think that'd be really difficult to do. In a way, we're going to have to, pull a George W. Bush and go with our gut on this if we do something like this because of the potential gain. But I think that just going back very quickly about the plugging up large commercial, I think it's wonderful that the call center worked for Independence, and I think there's potential here for that kind of thing. I wouldn't ever shoot for that exclusively. I think we have some other real challenges, not to mention, do we have the housing infrastructure now to manage 200 people earning $11 an hour and 100 earning more than that? I don't know. I don't think so. And also, in my experience, we've often heard that, I'm almost done here, but folks like Google or other call centers, if you ever entertain a relocation to a community like ours, one of the questions that comes up isn't just about reliability of internet service, it's reliability of power. Like, how often does your power go out? No more than 48, 72 hours in a given year. Okay, thank you. We're done. And I think that I'd have real concerns about commercial pipe.
Before I turn in, we'll go here and then over here and over here. But let me just throw this out in a broader sense on economic development. Okay? Is economic development providing a place for one person to move in because they like living here and creates one job from their home? Or is it providing a place for a business that's going to bring 10 or 12 jobs with them to hire people in the city? Or is it both?
Hi, my name is William Arns. My wife happens to be the CEO of the hospital, so I know a little bit about, some of the things that are attracting people. But when we split up residential and commercial, there is sort of a burgeoning change the way people are working. It hasn't really flowered yet, but there's the cottage industry, which kind of bridges that gap, and that is something that would fit on the coast. One of the things that we brought up is power, but we also don't have great transportation either. So attracting big businesses to the coast is kind of unrealistic unless you have a freeway in place or some reliable transportation. But cottage industries would flourish having dedicated, fast, high-speed broadband.
Thank you. Okay. I think we're over here for these two, and then to Lewis.
I think it's clearly both. And in terms of attracting higher paying people to the area and growing the tax base, a company in San Francisco recently started offering something called an outlocation package. They were actually encouraging people that they were hiring in the Bay Area to leave because it's just too crowded, it's too expensive, and quality of life is becoming very, very hard in the Bay Area. And so I think that there is an absolute opportunity to attract higher paying jobs, expand the tax base on an individual residential basis, but it really is both. But I think, has been pointed out, there are many infrastructure issues that create barriers to really fully realizing the commercial development. And as was stated, some basic, power, transportation, and other issues, I think, are going to limit our ability to attract, very large employers. However, smaller divisions or business units, I think, are absolutely possible. But in order to do that, it absolutely requires the investment in terms of reliable, high-speed internet infrastructure. And so I think the opportunity is there based upon the limits of existing infrastructure, provided that this investment is made in terms of broadband.
All right, I'll be quick because this is actually something I brought a little list regarding. The quick answer is both. Real estate's not getting any cheaper, and the service-based economy is not going away. The trend towards telecommuting is there, and I would love to see our citizens be able to bring more money into the community without more cars on the road and heads in beds, as our current model works out to be. But I have a 4-point just quickly here, and to start with tourism, because that's really what our focus is in our economy currently, is that we can attract a better qualified customer to Lincoln City. We can stop with this scattergun approach of anybody's good, and we can start attracting those with more disposable income to leave more in our community, because we can attract those in the tech sector to vacation or part-time live here. So we can attract, if we're going to have an economy that is run partially like a business, as that part of our economy is, we do have to look at qualified customers. And so this will allow us to attract a higher quality of qualified customer to Lincoln City. Solopreneurs and entrepreneurial activities will increase, and if we partner with our high school and colleges to have pathways to success to help develop those things, we can absolutely stimulate the economy over the next 5 to 10 years, because we don't want to look at it today. The service-based economy and the telecommuting economy and the home-based economy are going to continue to grow over the next 5 to 10 years as more and more of us try to squeeze into smaller and smaller spaces. Office space is expensive. Merchants, we could create a Lincoln City 365 marketplace. My business in Nelscott, Rock Your World. We have customers come in from all over the world who take a look at the quality of our merchandise, say, that's great, I'm on vacation, and they purchase from us 365 days a year. That's how we have stabilized and are able to be present in the community 365 days a year, and we are growing and adding employees. And then, as I said, telecommuting. I would love to see more paycheck money come into this town with fewer cars on the road and fewer heads and beds on the summer, because we are at the point where owning a retail business in this town, when we're at maximum capacity, people are afraid to pull over, and they don't spend the time wandering around our shopping districts when we are absolutely busting at the gills. I would love to see a community where our locals can spend money and start buying our homes back.
Okay, any other thoughts on economic development? I kind of got, oh, I'm sorry, Louis, I forgot.
Thanks. I'm actually repeating some of what Laura just said, but I just wanted to throw it out. Anything we could do, if we do attract big companies in here, I think it's important that we figure out ways to start getting our existing workforce here able to take some of these jobs so that we're not just importing a bunch of higher paid tech people into town. I'm one of these people that grew up in the Silicon Valley area, and I saw a 900 square foot house with bars on the front go from about 120,000 to about 850. So I know what happens when you get a lot of high paid people coming in and bidding over houses. But I think it would be great, again, looking forward to kind of our tourism-based economy, to figure out how can we start transitioning the younger people to be ready to take these jobs when they come here. And I don't know, again, I'm new here, so I don't know a lot of what sort of job services and training programs exist, but I think that would be something to look at.
One thing I wanted to point out about with the marketplace, and this is a little bit off, but in the construction of our new building that we just did across the street, I found that all three of the companies were eager to get on board and put development money in where it didn't cost us anything to make sure that fiber was in there and everything was in there. And they're definitely willing to do it for commercial. And one of the things we learned on East Devils Lake Road is if somebody on there signed up as a business account, $1,500 was put out into the build-up fund for them. So it was cheaper for them to sign up and get cable up to their house 500 feet, 600 feet than as opposed to residential. So I'm glad to see the three companies doing that, but there is a difference there between the business and residential. But I'm happy with what I've seen in the 28 years I've been here.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit of where we go from here. So ultimately, from this, Councilor Casper will take some reporting back to the City Council. We have 4 of our councilors here today, and thank you for coming. And then to determine where we go from here. This is not an immediate process. There will be much more exploration that would need to be done, including figuring out costs and everything else that would be associated with that. Councilor, do you have any, you want to wrap it up, or do you want me to wrap it up?
If we have next steps, we need people who are wanting to be engaged. And I think the people who are here are that group of people. So I would like them to be, willing to provide input when we do to go to the council and to come back to you. So I do hope that we have all your emails and everything, because you're a very crucial part. You've come here and participated and enlightened us all, and hopefully kicking off the project and for further discussion.
I just want to say that this has been one of the most wonderful public meetings I've ever been to as a public servant. You guys, this is a very sophisticated group, and the discussion was amazing. And I mean, I've just been sitting back here shaking my head like, yeah, that's exactly what you should be saying and thinking about. But to your point, that this is something that you're going to have to educate the rest of the community on, because like you learned today, like most people don't even know what an upload, download, megabit. I mean, these are the things that it's going to be, you got to put the time into really educating your community on why you would do something like this. And what you've been talking about today is a public utility, and the difference there between a commodity and a public utility. And if you present it in those ways of, this is not just economic development, it's community development as well, the health, the education, the access, the opportunity. I think that's a big, long process, but you can do it. And this has been great. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you for letting me probe a little bit, ask a few hard questions. I find that when I work with our staff here, if the more we probe in with hard questions, the better ultimately our outcomes will be. So thank you so much for being here. And for our MyNet folks, thanks again for coming. We sure appreciate it. If you didn't get a chance to sign in, please do so on the way out so we have your name and your email address so we can call on you if we need for further action. Thank you much.